Okay then, so now we know all the basics about local storage. What I want to do is take what we've learned over the last few lectures and apply it to our weather app. So remember, I said I kept open all of the files and folders from the weather app here on the left, and what we need is index.js right here. This is the index file for the weather app. So I'm now going to open up this in a live server and we can see it right here. Press F12 to open up the console just in case we need that as well. Okay, so what I want to do now is whenever a user types in some kind of location here, for example, London, then presses enter, we take this value here and we store it in local storage. Then if a user clicks off the web application and then comes back later or just refreshes the page, then what we can do is we can see if we have a city stored in local storage. If we have a city stored, then we could take that city and we could make a request for that information and update the UI with that city. So let's do that. Let's come over to app.js and come down to where we have this event listener for the submit event. So that's every time a user presses enter here. So every time they enter a new location essentially. So what I'd like to do now is take this city that we get from that input field and store it in local storage. So let me do first of all a little comment to say set local storage, and then underneath I'm going to say local storage dot set item, and I'm going to call this item city. You can call it what you want, like location or whatever you want. I'm calling it city because it makes sense to me. And then the value of this is going to be this thing, city, that we get from that form field. This is what a user enters. So save that. And now every time a user enters a new location, what we're doing is taking that new location and storing it in local storage. So it's always going to be the most recent location that a user's entered, because every time they enter a new one, it's just overwriting the same property or the same key in local storage with that most current value. So let me give this a whirl. I'm going to now say New York and press enter. And now if I go to the application tab and check out local storage, we can see we have a city property or a city key and the value is New York. If I enter something different like Manchester and press enter, then we can see it updates to Manchester. Now if I was to refresh at some point, then although we're not loading this automatically, we still have that city value right here of Manchester. So we know that was the most recent location or city that a user searched for. So what I would like to do is when a user first lands on the page, check, do we have a city stored in local storage? If we do, I want to take that city and I want to make an API call to update the city and show that in the browser automatically so they don't have to type anything out. If they don't, then we won't show anything. So let's do this check right at the bottom. Not in any kind of event listener, it's just out in the root of the document. So we're automatically going to run this code every time the application starts when a user refreshes or first visits the website. And what we're going to do is a little if check. And this if check is going to see if a certain item exists inside local storage. So we're going to say if local storage dot get item, that's how we get an item, and the item name is city. That's what we called it right here. Now remember, if this exists, then it's going to return a string, and a string of any length is always a truthy value. Now, if it doesn't exist, it's going to return null. We saw that before, and null is a falsy value. So this if is only going to run this code block if this city actually exists. So if that's the case, what we want to do is call the update city function right here, because that makes the API calls for us, and we need to pass in the city that's stored in local storage. So let's do this first of all. We'll say update city and pass in the city, which is this thing right here. So I'm going to copy that again and paste it right in here. So that could be New York in our case, or Manchester, because that's the value. So we're getting that city, and remember this returns us a promise. So we tack on the .then method and we take the data that we get back from this and we do something with it. Now what we should do with it is update the UI. That's what we do here. We call update city, pass in a city, then we take that data and we update the UI so we can show it in the browser. So let's do exactly the same thing. Down here we have the data now from the API call. Now let's update the UI with that data. So we'll pass it in. And also at the end, we'll just catch any error like so, and we'll log that to the console just in case there is one. Okay, so now this is all done and hopefully it's going to work. So now if I save this, the page is going to refresh and it should automatically make an API call for Manchester and then show that on the page. So let me save and cross my fingers and come over here, and now we can see automatically we get Manchester. Now I'm going to place Hong Kong in here and press enter. That's going to update this, but it's also going to update local storage over here. Now if I refresh, I'm going to do a hard refresh, then it automatically loads the next time round. Now if I was to delete something over here, like if I was to delete all of this, then refresh, now I no longer see that on the page. So it's only doing this if this exists in local storage.